All right, 41, Genesis chapter 41. We're going to pick up in just a minute in verse 37, but let's back up just a second to sort of catch up where we are. He was sold off into slavery. He rose up in Potiphar's house. There, Potiphar's wife pursued him, lied about him. As a result of all of that, he was thrown into prison. As he was in prison, the butler, the baker of Pharaoh were thrown into prison where he was. He was given charge over them. One night, both of them had dreams. He interpreted those dreams. And the butler who was restored, he had asked him, when you see Pharaoh, put in a good word for me. I shouldn't be here. And then, of course, the butler was restored. And what did the text tell us about his reaction or his follow-up on all that? Yeah, he forgot about him. How long did he forget about him? 2 years. It says after 2 full years, and then it gives us the account of Pharaoh's dreams here. Pharaoh has those dreams. No one can interpret for him. Then the butler remembered, oh, Joseph, yes, he can do this for you. So he sent and he called Joseph out of prison. And then Joseph interprets that for him. And he gives him advice. What was the advice that he gave him with the impending 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine? Okay, put some up. What sum of some? Yeah, 1/5. So 20%. Put it back and store that up so we have grain to get through the famine. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But when he gave that advice, we want to pick up now in verse 37 and read down through 46 and see what response Pharaoh and the others have to that. So Genesis 41, 37 to 46. Who will grab that? Ron.
So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, "Bow the knee." So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, and daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt.
All right, so here's that account of him being elevated from being a prisoner to a place of power in the land of Egypt. What position would we think of this as? No, vice president is nearly the most useless office in the United States government.
Secretary of State.
No, it's maybe in our system. Yeah, prime minister is what it would be in where they have usually royalty. And I think of Great Britain. You know, they've got a monarch that in theory has rulership over the land. It's their land. It's their kingdom. But the prime minister is the one who functionally runs the country and is the leader of the country. And that is essentially what Joseph is that prime minister. He says, you know, you're going to be second only to me. John?
There's a word called viceroy, which is someone who rules a country on behalf of the sovereign leader, and that's exactly what Joseph was, and that's, I think, the proper name for what his position was, because he ran the show for the sovereign God of Egypt.
Exactly right. So he's put into this position. It's interesting how that there's this prisoner that's standing before him, and he interprets the dreams and he tells him what to do as a result of that information. And it impressed Pharaoh so much, but not just Pharaoh. It wasn't like Pharaoh's just this gullible, sort of buffoon of a guy, because he talks to his servants. He said to his servants. So there's this idea that he's consulting. And when it says servants, let's understand he's not talking about the guy who sweeps his floors and makes up his bed or stuff like that. It's talking about his counsel. It's talking about those who are in his cabinet, if you will, that he's expressing to them, hey, who can we get better than this? Because all these supposed magicians and wise men that I have asked to tell me something, they didn't have a clue. This guy has a clue. He knows what's going on here. Paul?
39, verse 39.
Okay.
Inasmuch as God has shown you, he made it obvious that God was.
Yes. When he came before him, he said, God gives the interpretation. God will give you what you need to know about these things. So, yes, and Pharaoh responds with that. The Spirit of God's with you, so you're the one. We want you in that position. So he raises him up. He gives him all those special things, including that signet ring, which is basically the authority of Pharaoh, what he says he's going to do. Clothed him in a certain way, put him in the second chariot. So when he goes out into public, everybody's going to know that's the guy who's running the country on behalf of Pharaoh. Now, question number 2 is, how old was Joseph when he was raised to power? How long had he been in Egypt up to this point? And be ready to discuss that time period in the life of this young man. So 46 tells us what? 30 years old. When was he sold down into the land of Egypt? 17, so 13 years. When you think of 13 years, how does that strike you? Short period, long period, what?
In a young man's life, that's a long time.
Carrie?
I was just going to say, at the age of 17, 13 years would have been almost half of what he'd already lived. So he lived a significant period of time in that culture.
Okay. Anybody remember back to high school and how long it took you to get through high school? Yeah. Feels like for a lot of us, it felt like high school was forever. But now we look back on it, it was like that, just really quick. Here he is, 17, being sold down into the land of Egypt, and he's there for 13 years before this happens, and it seems like a long time. When he was 17 years old, before he was sold, what was he? Not age-wise, but who was he? Yeah, he's a favored son in a blessed household. He's sold off into slavery due to what? Okay, envy, jealousy. It was no fault of his own. It was the uncontrolled emotions and passions of his brothers that got a hold of them, and they just acted in an evil and selfish way against him. He gets down into Egypt. He's then serving as a slave, which would not be an enviable position, but he was in a little better spot than what some others would have found themselves in slavery. But even so, he's still a slave. But in that position, what do we see him as and doing?
He was a godly man. He gave God praises for everything he received and everything he did.
Okay. He maintained his faith in God and he maintained his integrity. And so he's raised up. And then what happens? Why? Was it his fault?
He resisted sin.
Okay, again, not his fault, but what was it? It was evil. It was the uncontrolled, undisciplined passions of his master's wife. Evil got a hold of her. She went with that. She allowed that to control her. And of course, she lied about him, and he ended up in prison. In prison, he kept his faith and his integrity. And now, where is he? What we just read about.
You can say twice in his life he's had his cloak stripped off of him, the coat of many colors, and then his cloak with the Potiphar's wife. But now he's got the robes and the jewelry, and it's been a total reversal of what he's been through up to that point.
Okay. Yeah, as that viceroy, as that second in command in Egypt, he has power, he has possessions, he has great wealth now, and he has great blessings there. As we go on and read here, it talks about the fact that he has these sons, and let's grab that real quick, verses 47, and let's go down through 52 here, 47 through 52, and we'll kind of round out this discussion. Who will get that for us? Clint?
During the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly, and he gathered up all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons born to Joseph, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction.
Okay. So, first of all, it just makes mention of the abundance of grain. They quit counting it. It was so much, they couldn't tabulate it. It's just overflowing with that grain in the years of abundance. But then it mentions that he has 2 sons. Anything stand out to you about those 2 sons?
One, they were born in that year of plenty, so that the times were good. Oftentimes when things are bad, people actually do decide, I'm not going to have a child during this time frame. The environment's not right for it, it's not fit. But in this time frame, they were good to go.
Yeah, it was during this abundance. And so there are these physical, material blessings coming in for the whole kingdom. And for him, obviously, he's been given a wife, and now he's been blessed with children. There's fruitfulness in his household. Anything else? What are their names? Anybody? Hey, these are Hebrew names. These are not Egyptian names. It talked about how Pharaoh gave him a name, that funny one in verse 45, Zaphnath Paaneah. Gave him, so while he's kind of known as that in his Egyptian role, he, at his heart, is still a devoted worshiper of Jehovah God, and he names his sons that reflects that. He hasn't, because of the prosperity, because of the position, the power, all these things where he's at now, he hasn't abandoned the Lord. He hasn't forgotten about the Lord. It hasn't blinded him. You know, his hardships didn't blind him, and these blessings aren't blinding him. And so he names him this. What's interesting about the name of the firstborn, Manasseh? Anything?
He gives God the credit here, and he says that he's, because of this blessing of this child, I can forget the hardship that I've suffered.
What does that tell you about Joseph for 13 years?
One, he truly did suffer, and he's a very forgiving man.
Okay, we'll get to his forgiveness here in Lord willing next study especially. But it tells you he hurt. He struggled. There were days, no doubt, that he had bad days, tough days, thinking about, reflecting on, going through all those things that had happened to him, again, because of others and their ungodly attitudes and behavior. He had internal struggles as he went through these things, but now he says, you know what? Where I am now, God has made me forget my toil in my Father's house. And it's not the idea that he doesn't know that he went through it, or if he were to think about that there's not a bit of still a lingering sting there. But he's saying, I'm through that. I'm in a different place now. And so it wasn't something that crushed him, that overwhelmed him, but it's something that he's praising God. He's brought me through it. And then, of course, with Ephraim, he says, you know, I'm fruitful. God has made me fruitful down here in this land. So circling back now to thinking about him and where he is, as was mentioned, you know, 13 years is a long time in the life of a young man, from 17 to 30. And everything that he had went through, all that mistreatment, all that injustice, he had the heartaches, the sorrows that came along with that. But now look at where he is. Clint?
Another thing I think that's really remarkable here is, you know, Potiphera, that's how you say his name, his father-in-law, is this priest of On. So he's got a title. So he's classified into this social class. Not only is he a leader, but he's into this social class now that he hadn't been in before.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's naming his children by a Hebrew name and not Egyptian names. He's kind of still going against the grain here. He's his own man. He's making his own decisions. And like you said, he's still following after God. And that may be because of the names that he gives to his sons, but he's standing up for himself. He's not consumed by this social class that he's been now put into and married into. He's still his own man.
Right. He sure is. John, do you have something?
Yeah, you know, we see a total lack of bitterness over all these things that he's been through. What a lesson that is for us. We don't allow the trials of this life to make us bitter. He doesn't take credit, you know, as Clinton is alluding, he doesn't take credit for these great things himself. He remains very modest. And he uses wise, now God did guide him, but he uses wise judgment in preparing in this time of plenty. We don't want to miss the fact that he had things great for a while. Saved up, so when the hard times came, he could take care of his family, he could take care of himself, and he could take care of everybody else. What a lesson that is. His whole life and all his decisions and the way he did things is a great lesson for us. We need to be wise with what God has given us. We need to have righteous ambition. We don't want to take credit, you know, for the good things that happen to us, and we need to not be bitter when those hard times finally come.
Mm-hmm. Hank, you have something?
Well, that's just, about the same thing John said. I was going to add to it. If you've ever, you know, we all been away from our home, regardless, you know, John's originally from Missouri, so I know he can understand. He still misses it somewhat, even though he has a family here, and Joseph did too. It shows us he forgot his toils that he had there, but he still missed his family, his father, his mother, and he lived righteously even though he wasn't in his own land.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, he's young, he's away from home, he was surrounded by idolatrous people, but he remained true and faithful through it all. And yes, it gives us.
Think about it, when you were in Korea, you missed the United States and you had your family with you. He had no one, and you can imagine what he went through? I mean,
Yeah, I had no one over there either. They didn't send her over. No, they would. Yeah, no, but I understand what you're saying. I did have brethren over there with whom I could associate while I was there. So, but yeah, he still did love his family. He cared about him, as everything from here forward makes abundantly clear. But thinking about this, do you think his father Jacob would have made every effort to retrieve and rescue him if he knew what was going on? If he knew those boys had sold him, and when they got back, he found that out, he'd have been hopping on a camel and off he'd go, try to trace down those Midianite traders.
and he may even punish one or two of them to death. We don't know, because it didn't happen that way.
Well, thinking about the fact that he would want to get Joseph, out of that slavery. If he was in Potiphar's house, you could see him going to Potiphar, and offering Potiphar, what do you want? Let me buy him back to get him out of that. If he found out he was in prison, go down, get him out of prison. I need to take him home. I'll get him out of your hair here. Joseph wanted to get out of prison. Would any of that been any good whatsoever? Let me ask you this. Joseph, at 30 years old, is he in a good spot? Enviable spot? Yeah. How many 30-year-olds today would like to be viceroy with the gold, the jewels, the position, the power that he had? Yeah, that's what I want. How many of them would want to go through 13 years of misery to get there? Yeah. It's a good thing Jacob didn't know about any of this, because he would have tried to interfere. This was God working this out for Joseph, but then Joseph is the tool and the instrument that's being used for Jacob and the entire family in Israel in the development of God's plan. Mike and then Ron.
I would say that, it doesn't seem to indicate at all that this was the desire of Joseph to be in this position. He just kind of went along with whatever God's plan was. He didn't make a scheme or say, well, if I do this, then that will happen. He's just kind of going along, trusting what God said. I'll bring you through this.
Ron?
Stephen, it strikes me as we look at this and what you're describing here to us, and the change in the political structure that's occurring by the authority given to Joseph, that Pharaoh is a man of faith, Joseph is a man of faith, and as we consider individuals, people believe in something, and Pharaoh placed his faith in Joseph, and it appears that his faith was unwavering, because during this period of good and bountiful time, you can almost believe that there would be those that, just as you described, a 30-year-old in this position of authority, second to Pharaoh, but there is no wavering there, and we see the same thing in Joseph, but his faith is in God. So we all have belief in something.
Right. And that unwavering support of Joseph through this time, because you could imagine, one, as John brought up last week, people griping about 20% tax on their crops and everything. So yeah, you could see how they would chafe under that. And then think about year 5, year 6, year 7. There would be people who say, there's no famine coming. Why are we still doing this? Don't we have enough already? We've quit counting. Why are we still? But again, Pharaoh, I believe what he said, and he stuck with him. And then, of course, it pays off big time. But Joseph, where he is now, is in a place where he's useful for many different people, in a place where he's come into his own. This is something he thrived in. He didn't struggle when he's doing this. He's been faithful and had integrity, and he's learned these skills and different things through the years, and now when he's here, he's ready for it. He wasn't ready when he was 17. When he was sold down into the land of slavery, he was not ready to do this. And so 13 years passes with ups and downs and all of that through it, but now he's ready. And he's in a good position. He's able now to live a joyful and rewarding life. A great lesson for us, because we go through hardships. We see people we love go through hardships, and it eats away at us, and understandably so, because we love our family, we love others, and it breaks our heart. But we don't understand, we don't see the end of that story. Joseph in prison didn't see the end of that story. But now it's coming about. And so we need to take heart in these things and trust in the Lord and His working in our life and the lives of others. Any other thoughts there down through 52? All right, let's read 53 to 57, please. Who will get that? 53 to 57. Genesis 41, 53 to 57, John.
The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come. And Joseph had said, as Joseph had said, there was famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph, what he says you do. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth.
Okay. It's interesting how the years of plenty seem to be isolated to Egypt, but the famine hits everywhere. But that part of that reason is it's going to force people down into the land of Egypt where they have the supplies, which, Lord willing, we'll study and talk about going forward. But so you've got the famine unfolding here. Grain's being sold back to the Egyptians. It's being sold to other nations. And so this is one of the ways that power and wealth are built up during the hard times in Egypt. The Pharaoh becomes essentially owner of everything and everyone over time. But it's interesting to me how that Joseph, in the position he's in now, has the ability to reach out to his family. He could have said, hey, I got a couple servants. I want you guys to go up there. I want you to find them. I want you to talk to them. I want you to get them. I want you to bring, but he doesn't do that. And I can't explain the reasons why he doesn't do that. You could imagine, is the pain just too great? He doesn't want to open up that wound again. Is he thinking, well, my father has just abandoned me down here. He never came looking for me. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe things have changed in the family and in his attitude toward me, or, but it's interesting that he doesn't reach out. Even as that famine begins to set in, he doesn't do anything. And it goes back to, through all these different things he went through, he's a man, obviously, of patience and great faith in letting God work things in his life. It's not saying that he didn't do anything, because he worked hard, He did his daily task. He honored the people that he was serving. He did all of that. And then God worked these other things out in his life. Any other thoughts?
I think 51, verse 51,
Yes, sir.
God had made him forget. And he's a busy man, so that accounts for.
He was a busy man.
Yeah.
He had a biblical work ethic.
Yes.
Said he went out immediately from the presence of Pharaoh and went out there and got to work. That's
He-
a biblical work ethic.
Yes. And it talked about how he went throughout all the land. So he wasn't just there in the capital city, so to speak. He was going out and he was setting up. He was doing the logistics of the grain collection, going around and appointing the men who would have to oversee that. So he wasn't the guy standing there, hey, put the grain on the scales, or let me see what you're bringing in today. But he's the guy that set it all up, put the system into place, made sure that that was all functioning and working right so this could all be collected. Chapter 42, let's read verses 1 through 5 as we begin to read about his brothers coming back in the picture. So 42, 1 through 5. Who's got that? Philip.
When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, "Lest some calamity befall him." And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan.
Okay. So Jacob, he sees there's grain in Egypt. And so there are traders going through the area or travelers going through, and the word's gotten back, or he's seen, people traveling with these grain wagons or whatever it was, or sacks on their donkeys, and he learns, hey, there's grain down there. Then how does he respond to that? Verse 1. Personally, I think there's a little humor here.
Why are you sitting around looking at these?
Why haven't you done something? He starts chastening his boys for it. Like, why haven't you gone? Get us some grain. Obviously, they're running out of food, and evidently it's the staples of the food, the grain that they would need in their daily diet would be a big part of their diet. Later, we're going to learn, of course, they have some other food sources, but either they're not very much, or it's the last little bit that they had. But however that is, he's telling his boys, you need to get up and do something about this. Quit just sitting around looking at each other. And the 10 brothers want to go down, but verse 4 tells us what? Why did he keep Benjamin back? Okay. So we know the rest of the story. He doesn't want to put Benjamin in any type of risk, any type of danger, even though Benjamin's a full-grown man now. He doesn't want to do that. So what happened, I think it's interesting how Jacob's favoritism and affection didn't disappear when the boys got rid of Joseph. It just turned to Benjamin. So he still has a favored son. So their effort to solve their problem was completely futile. Now he has a different favorite in the family. So one of the things it tells us is that the scheming, allowing the evil to take us over, that doesn't solve your issues and your problems. You have to put your faith in God, trust in Him, be humble. John.
I think that he doesn't trust his boys, because he's not. I don't think that think the Egyptians are going to do something to him. I think that he doesn't trust the boys to take care of his favorite. And I think when you tie that in with the situation with Simeon when they come back, he lays out the blame that he thinks that they're the cause of why Joseph isn't here anymore, and there's a reason why Simeon isn't here anymore. And that's why he didn't want to let Benjamin go with him, because he didn't trust
Yeah.
So he knows they did something, he just doesn't know, may not know what.
Yeah. There is a lack of confidence in them, a mistrust in his boys. Now, we're going to begin reading in verse 6 and go forward with Joseph. Go ahead.
I just want to make just a very quick side note.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of cross-reference just a little bit, but those who believe that the flood did not happen all over the face of the earth, but it was localized, this is the same exact language that this famine happens over the face of the earth, and it's obvious not local to just Egypt, but also reaching into other lands also.
Right. And it tells you, at least in part, what the years of abundance were. They were incredibly abundant to be able to feed not just Egypt, but these other nations, the peoples at least that came to get it. So yes. And as we go down through here now, there are people who assign evil motives to Joseph. I am dead set against that. Joseph is not getting revenge on his brothers. And we know that because you go through to the end of it and you see everything that unfolds. He obviously struggles with his emotions, maybe on different levels that are just not revealed to us, but he's not trying to get back at them in the things that he does with them. And I think as we go through that, we see that. He actually treats them with great gentleness, considering the position he was in and what he could have done to them. And so just keep that in mind as we go through here. So let's read verses 6 to 9, Genesis 42, 6 through 9. Who will grab that? Ron?
Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them, and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land."
All right. So question number 3 I had asked, why do you think Joseph could recognize his brothers, but they could not recognize him?
If we look at our own appearance, I've changed so much. Someone saw me at 17, and he's 37 now, so
He's
a lot from 17 to 37.
just a minor correction. He's 39 now.
39 now.
Yes, because there's been 7 years of plenty and 2 years of the famine, which is revealed a little later. But
I forgot the 2 years.
yeah, he's around 39 years old right here. Ron?
I think also when you're not expecting something, it may not immediately be recognized to you. And I experienced that where I was attending a congregation while I was away, and there was a member of the congregation that I was with was there, walked right up to me and spoke to me, and then it dawned on her who I was.
Right,
It just like, she just didn't even recognize me at first.
right.
So that might be part of it as well, is that he's in a condition, he's in a way, his face has changed. They would not have expected him in that position at all.
Exactly. We've all been in those times where people are at a place,
Yes.
and then sometimes we're gone and then we realize, oh, that's who that was. Something like that. John, and then,
They probably think he's dead, though.
yeah, they do think he's
It's
dead.
not entering their mind.
Right.
Yeah.
To them, he's dead.
Yeah, they would never dream that he's there at all. Hank?
Well, not only they figured he's dead because they sold him into slavery. Slaves didn't last that long. To some
Mhm.
of those brutal places. But he's now older, and he's in a different culture. He's not dressed like a Hebrew slave anymore.
Right. He's dressed like a ruler of Egypt,
Yeah.
the viceroy. All those accoutrements and entrapments and all that stuff, he's got that going on. Was Mike? No. Nancy.
Well, to them, like we said, he's dead, he's gone. They don't have any reason to look for him. But for him, his love for his family is still very much in his heart. And so, of course, he recognizes them, even though the same amount of time has passed. But they are in his heart, so of course he recognizes them.
Right. And they come in as a group. It might have taken him, if it was just one of them that came in, it might have taken a little bit for him to connect, because it's been just as long for them as it has been for him. It's been 22 years now at this point. And so they've changed, they've grown. But they walk in as 10, they're speaking their language because he's speaking to them through an interpreter. He's speaking a different language, so they don't understand that. And it's just much easier for him to realize, that's my brothers. I can't believe this. Here they are. But they had no clue he was there. And it needed to be that way because of what unfolds. Was there something else, Ron?
I was just going to say what you did, that there's another barrier of distinction there, that he spoke through an interpreter, so they didn't hear him speak.
Right, exactly. So it says he sees them there and he remembers his dreams because it's just been fulfilled, right? That first dream was fulfilled. Here they are, they just bowed before him. I cannot imagine the overwhelming emotions and how his heart's racing right now. Wow, here they are. But it's very shrewd of him then, the tact that he takes on them. You are spies. You are spies. This is a complete setup, and I don't know if he thought of this right there in the moment, and then he pauses here in just a second, and then he figures out, okay, here's how I'm going to handle this. But he comes up with this, and it really is a stroke of genius in accusing them, because it gives him an excuse to take some actions to work through everything here. But let's read 10 to 17. We'll start on this, and then we'll pick up, Lord willing, next week. 10 to 17, who's got that? Clint.
They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "We are your servants. Our 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan, behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let them bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh surely you are spies." And he put all them together in custody for 3 days.
Okay. So what's their response to him?
I like that. We are honest men part.
Yeah, we're all honest men. What did he know about that? No, you are not. Okay, now, that was the past. And he is designing a test here. Yeah, we'll find out. We'll find out about you now. It's what he's digging into. Ron or Nancy?
Through their lips, they admit to him that they are servants.
Okay, yeah. We're all one man's sons, so that they're divulging information about them, which he knew it, and he knew they weren't spies. He knew, He knew his brothers weren't there. It wouldn't be unusual for spies to come down, especially at a time like this, to see what vulnerabilities there would be so people could come in and exploit that. But he knows for a fact they're not there to spy. He knows they're sons of one man. Doubts the honesty. Servants, yes, your servants. They have completely humbled themselves before him. Of course, they don't realize who it is, but this is that fulfillment of the dream. And he responds again, no, you come to spy out the nakedness of the land. No, we're 12 brothers, sons of one man in the land of Canaan. In fact, the youngest with our father, and one is no more. How do you think that hit him? Very rough. You just imagine, here they are talking about him being dead. They believed he was dead, as was mentioned a while ago. So he keeps pressing it, though. He keeps pressing it on them. No, it's as I spoke to you, you're spies. Here's how I'm going to test you. Your youngest brother has to come down here. Why would he want that? Now, there's more later that comes out, but
Because Benjamin is his full brother.
I want to see how he is. How has he fared all these years? He's not here. Now, why is he not here? That's the question. Has something happened to him that he can't be here? Is there something else going on? I want to know what's happening with Benjamin. And he designs a test that we see later to know exactly what that attitude is. Very good, very good. All right, so we'll pause there and pick up, Lord willing, next week. I find it interesting that he puts him in prison for 3 days, lets him cool off, lets himself think up, here's what I'm going to do with you. All right.